Around half of Jewish Israelis support killing all Palestinians in Gazan cities captured by the so-called Israel Defense Forces. That's according to a new poll which has been conducted by Penn State University of Israeli citizens, and the findings overall are deeply disturbing, testament to the genocidal mania which defines Israeli society, and underlines how this genocide can only be stopped externally, not least through the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign and mass movements, which are starting to show results, thanks to people like you. Now, the poll results are in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. The question asked is, do you support the claim that the IDF, in conquering an enemy city, should act in a manner similar to the way the Israelites did when they conquered Jericho under the leadership of Joshua, i.e., to kill all its inhabitants? 47% of all respondents said yes. Now, you have to just bear into account that's the people who are willing to say it. To actually openly admit that you want to kill all Palestinians in Gaza, including babies, toddlers, elderly people, well, that is quite something, isn't it? You'd imagine that there is another cohort who also agree with it, but don't want to openly admit to it. The polling also shows that 65% believe there is a current incarnation of Amalek. This is important, we'll come back to it. As a quick summary, this refers to the biblical story of the nation of Amalek, who attacked the Israelites. God orders the Israelites in response to spare no one, but kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings, oxen and sheep, camels and asses. Of those 65% who believe there is a current incarnation of Amalek, 93% believe that the mitzvah, that is religious commandment, to erase the memory of Amalek is also relevant to the contemporary Amalek. It gets so much worse. 82% of those surveyed expressed support for the forced deportation of the residents of Gaza. This itself, to be clear, is a genocidal act, as genocide scholars have said. When towards the beginning of the genocide, I interviewed Omar Bartov, the Israeli-American professor of genocide and Holocaust studies, one of the preeminent experts on the Holocaust, incidentally, he said that ethnic cleansing often becomes genocide because the people you wish to remove do not wish to go. Now, the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which Israel is a signatory to, as is Britain, as is the United States, that defines genocide as a series of acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. In other words, the polling results shows that overwhelmingly Israeli society seeks to end the existence of the Palestinian people of Gaza. That's what an overwhelming number support. It continues. 56% of Jewish Israelis support the forced deportation of the Arab citizens of Israel. In other words, this refers to the 20% of Israeli society who are Palestinian. They are the descendants of the small minority of Palestinians who were not driven permanently from their homes in the Nakba, in the catastrophe of 1948. That's not referring to Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank, but in Israel itself. That is the official Israeli borders, who are not, it should be noted, treated as having equal rights by any stretch. They're third, fourth class citizens, and from whose ranks has emerged no meaningful resistance to the Israeli state. Here's a really important point. These polls reflect, of course, where Israeli society is at. And that Israeli society includes the soldiers, that is those who have guns and missiles and bombs at their disposal, those who are doing the killing. Israel has a conscript army, it has an army, you would expect to be representative of Israeli society, so you'd expect half of Israeli soldiers at least to be openly committed to killing all Palestinians in Gaza, let alone those who secretly think this. In fact, all the evidence we have about armies generally is that they are more likely to dehumanize the people subject to their occupation. These are the people doing the murdering, doing the slaughtering. These are the people who have the capacity to decide who lives and who dies. And we know a vast number of them, a huge number of them, believe in killing all Palestinians in Gaza. None of this should be a surprise. Or none of this should be, well, yeah, no, it shouldn't be a surprise. Shocking? Oh, it should be. Never stop being shocked. Never stop being shocked. But it shouldn't be a surprise. Before we discuss the incitement and intent in the statements of Israeli leaders and officials, polling has consistently shown the genocidal mania within Israeli society. In January 2024, 50.2% of Jewish Israelis thought an appropriate use of force was being used in Gaza. That force already by then had destroyed Gaza and butchered vast numbers of innocent people. That force meant apocalyptic conditions, but it gets so much worse. Another 43.4% thought that Israel was using too little force. So they saw that Gaza was being wiped from the face of the earth, and they decided that wasn't enough. Can you even imagine what more firepower would have actually looked like? Presumably, in line with the polling I read out, it just means immediate mass extermination. What else could it mean? In another poll on Israel's channel 13 days ago, when asked, does Israel have to let in humanitarian aid to Gaza, 53% of Israeli survey said no, 34% said yes, with 13% settling on don't know. Bear in mind again that 20% of Israeli citizens are Palestinians, who overwhelmingly have different views and will account for much of the 34%. And let's not pretend these sentiments just appeared in the aftermath of 7th October because of misdirected trauma. In a poll conducted between October 2014 and May 2015, nearly half of Jewish Israelis believe that Arabs should be expelled or transferred from Israel. 79% believe that Jews in Israel should be given preferential treatment. We've got a word for that. It's apartheid. 61% believe Israel was given by God to the Jewish people, a nonsense religious justification for land theft. Here's a really important point. This is really important. These poll results have nothing to do with the respondents being Jewish. Indeed, there are nearly as many Jews in the US, or around as many Jews, maybe more, as there are in Israel. As long ago as a year ago, around a third of Jewish Americans thought Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. That rose to nearly 4 in 10 Jewish Americans under 44. This is about the dynamics of settler colonialism, which is in no way unique to Israel historically, but has had genocidal implications, for example, in the Americas, in Africa, and so on. It's very straightforward. In settler colonialism, you have to justify stealing the land of other people. And you do it through dehumanization. You cannot believe you're victims of people like you, otherwise your emotional faculties, unless you're sociopathic, would stop you from accepting such an injustice. You have to justify it by saying, these people are backward, they're inferior, indeed they're not really human. And when your victims inevitably resort to various forms of violence, you then respond by seeing that as evidence they're an existential threat to you, that they are the inherent barbarians, even though you are the ones doing the violence of stealing their land and expelling them with all the physical violence that involves. From the very beginning, Israeli leaders tapped into, exploited, inflamed, justified the genocidal sentiments we can all see which exist in Israeli society. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said at the beginning, it's an entire nation out there that's responsible. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's not true. They could have risen up, fought against that evil regime. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared at the beginning, Israel was imposing a complete siege in Gaza, no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel, everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we are acting accordingly. Israeli General Ghassan Alian declared, Hamas became ISIS and the citizens of Gaza are celebrating instead of being horrified. Human animals dealt with accordingly. Israel has imposed a total blockade in Gaza, no electricity, no water, just damage. You wanted hell, you will get hell. Netanyahu said, both in an address to the Israeli people and then directly to the Israeli soldiers, you must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. He was referring to that biblical story where God ordered the Israelites to murder every last Amalekite, men, women, children, and livestock. And as the polling shows, 2/3 of Israeli society see the Palestinians as Amalek. Yair Golan, the opposition leader who has backed Israel's onslaught and never previously objected to this horror, to the treatment of the Palestinians during this horror, and indeed fantasized about the disappearance of all Palestinians, he declared that the Israeli Defense Forces was killing babies as a hobby. This genocidal incitement and evidence of intent has been relentless. Just this week, Nissim Vatiri, the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, the Israeli Parliament, and a member of Netanyahu's Likud party, declared that Israel must separate women and children en masse and then execute all of the men in Gaza. This is exactly what the Bosnian Serb army did at Srebrenica in 1995, which has been judged to be genocide. Note that it is illegal under the Genocide Convention and indeed Israeli law to publicly incite genocide, and the International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to take legal action against the public incitement of genocide. No action of any description has been taken. They'd have to arrest pretty much their entire political and media establishments. History will look back at this and go, of course, this is genocide. History will declare, how can everyone not have seen the genocidal intent from day one based on what Israeli leaders and officials said in public over and over again with no subtlety? And history will be repulsed that there was even a debate about whether this is genocide. And do you know what? History is going to be right. I know I speak for many of you watching when I say this has changed so many of us forever. We have watched our political and media elites facilitate a genocide that has been live streamed for 19 months, a genocide in which the perpetrators have boasted to the world over and over again about their genocidal intent with no subtlety, a genocide in which every possible crime has been committed. The mass slaughter of civilians, babies, toddlers, children, men, women, the elderly, the infirm, the butchery of medics, journalists, aid workers, the mass destruction of all civilian infrastructure, homes, hospitals, schools, libraries, universities, mosques, churches, repeated violent displacement, deliberate starvation, the destruction of agriculture, livestock, food production, a siege on all the other essentials of life like medicine and fuel, mass incarceration of innocent civilians, every possible form of torture, and yes, over and over again, rape, including Palestinians, literally raped to death. There's no coming back from this. How can you possibly argue that a political elite and a media elite, which has systematically lied about this, which has whitewashed it, which has airbrushed the truth, ignored atrocities, dehumanized the victims, not even pretended, not even bothered to pretend that the lives of those victims have any meaning, which has repeatedly regurgitated the lies of the perpetrators and deferred to their claims, which has demonized and defamed and monstered anyone speaking out against this horror. How can you possibly claim that political and media elite has any legitimacy ever again? They have no legitimacy, and we have to act accordingly. In time, we have to sweep those elites away. That includes politicians going to jail, and that includes journalists who are complicit in genocide having their careers ended. We can see now, as the enormity of the crime becomes impossible to ignore, when it is much, much too late, Western politicians and media outlets suddenly expressing horror and disgust at what's happening. They're very sad all of a sudden. And farcically, Netanyahu now denounces British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron for emboldening Hamas, even as, for example, the UK government continues to arm genocide, all because of meaningless words and empty gestures when it's much too late. The truth is, no genocide has been so confessed to as it happened, so documented as it happened. It was obvious from the start that this would be one of history's great crimes. You just had to listen to what Israeli leaders and officials were saying and see what the Israeli army was doing from the beginning. And unless we want to normalize this crime and pave the way for humanity as a whole to be overwhelmed with violent barbarism, then we have to make sure that all of those who are complicit face accountability. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts in your comments. Help us take on the pro-genocide media at patreon.com/7jersey4. Listen to us on the podcast, share the video, get the message out. I'll speak to you soon.